Right, hello everyone. Thanks for joining us for part 2 of this session. When we did this last time, we looked through this example project, which you can download at the link which will be displayed above. This is available on our website, and it shows you people talking about the Scottish referendum for independence, which was last year now, and a research project that we did interviewing people about what they feel. So this is a kind of real meaty research project, and you can download all of the different transcripts here, and also a coded example as well, which shows you how one person has gone through and done the coding. So when we looked at this project last week, we only brought in a couple of sources. I think there's 15 in total, and we did a very little bit of coding. So we created our first codes, we went through grouping and structuring them, and then we went through adding text onto the codes, which is just to drag and drop in that way. And what we're going to do now is actually jump forward a little bit and take that coded example project just as an example to show you how you can then use some of the features in Quirkos to explore the data once you've gone through and done all the long tedious work of actually doing the coding and assigning things to different bubbles, to different texts. So I'm just going to click on the open project here, and then this referendum coded example. Now this is quite a big project, so it does sometimes take a little while to load some of these functions. I'm just going to zoom in here a little bit. So now you can see, so this is my coding here. It's a bit of a mess, but this is kind of how it makes sense to me. I've kind of got things grouped thematically with the cluster diagrams here. So for example, this example here, we're talking about when people talking about other areas of the UK. So if they're talking specifically about Edinburgh or Glasgow, if they're talking about Europe, if they're talking about the rest of the UK outside of Scotland, and then that's closely linked kind of geographically on the canvas to my Scotland codes here. And this is everything people have said about that. So if I was to double click on other areas here, this shows us what's called the overlap view here. So these are the hierarchy of codes. So we've got rest of the UK and others as described. These are in descending size order. So I've done most of my coding on the rest of the UK. And then on the right, now you can see that's loaded all of the coding. There's a hell of a lot of it in this project. It's massive, from all the different sources that we have there, and about all of these different other areas of the UK. But if we wanted to click on just one of them, so for example, Edinburgh, we can click on that and then just see these are just the quotes that people are saying about Edinburgh. And when we do this, you'll note that we've now got lots of different colored stripes here. Now these indicate the different codes, the different themes that this piece of text has been assigned to. So we've got this yellow one here for Edinburgh, but we've also got, now these are popping up with the name on the bottom left. Finance, that's someone talking about, they're talking about employment, so that kind of makes sense. And then we've also got no, so somebody's talking about the no campaign there. So that's quite an important way that Quirkos works, is to have one piece of text and then break it up into as many codes as possible. And I'll show you exactly why that's useful right now. So when we can click on the home button here just to get to the main view, and what we can do is look at the connections between some of these texts. So some of these nodes, some of these sources. So if we actually choose any of these, so let's maybe choose, well, we were looking at Edinburgh, so why not Edinburgh? If we right click on Edinburgh and then click on the show overlap view. Now what this does is goes through and generates a view of all of the different bits of concurrent coding or double coding that we have in the project. So anywhere where Edinburgh has been coded with something else. So here we can see, just by clicking on it, there's actually 13 overlapping codes here. And these are the different sources that they appear in when people in Edinburgh have been talking about the Yes campaign. So that's the Yes for independence. And if we click on that, we can actually see that text to the right. But this cluster diagram here, now this is showing us the connections. So the ones which are closest to Edinburgh, these are the ones that have the most double coding. So yes and no are being coded about Edinburgh a lot. Lots of people talking about the visibility of campaigning for the referendum. The further out we go here, that's the less connections there are. So if we look for something like SNP up here, so we've only got 3 overlapping codes here, and here that people in Edinburgh are not talking about SNP as much as they are yes or no. So sometimes this is quite useful, and here it is quite useful because at least in the coding that I've done, Edinburgh seems to be people in Edinburgh are talking about the yes campaign just as much as the no campaign. In fact, identical number of overlapping codes. So that's quite interesting. So if we go back, let's have a look at Glasgow and see if there's any difference there. Click on the home button and then look at Glasgow, show overlap view. It'll be interesting to see. Okay, right. So a lot more people are talking about the yes campaign and talking about Glasgow than they are about the no campaign. So that's interesting. So that might be something that's demonstrating to us that in Glasgow there was a lot more discussion about the yes campaign, or there was more support for the yes campaign, which is actually what was came out in the voting, definitely. So this is an interesting way that you can explore any of the connections between your themes. And you can also add extra things here. So if you were reading through this section, for example, and then decided that this was actually about visibility, but it's not been coded as visibility, we can drag and drop that onto the visibility bubble there. And you'll see that they rearrange and visibility comes closer to the center. So this is a live updating graph of the connections between the different topics. So that's one way that we can explore the data. I'm just going to click on the home button here and then take us back to the main canvas view here. Now, one of the other things that we did last time was to assign some of the demographic details to the sources. And you may remember that that's with this button on the top right that opens the source properties view. So now in this project, we've got things described such as gender, occupation, and how they voted. So we can put in the gender here for June. That's not been done here. Make that female, and we can change the occupation here. So there's a couple of values here. So this person maybe is a senior nurse, and they voted yes in the campaign. And with the tabs here, we can go through and do that for lots of different people. So we've not actually assigned the genders here, but you can see that this is actually quite a quick way to do it. And here with the all sources view, you can go through and see all the sources we've got in the project now. So I think there's about 15, and we can check and see that they've got the gender assigned. Okay, so not from Adrian, so we'll put that in. And what else do we have here? To Alistair. Okay, so I've obviously got some work still to do here in adding different categories to these sources. But what we can do actually here is, first of all, there'll be an overview here. So this shows us straight away that when we're doing gender, we've not done a very good job here. 33% of people, we've not described what their gender is, but we've got an equal number of males and females here. And the occupation here, well, actually 66% of people we've not defined yet, and only again 66% of people we've not said how they voted. So we can go through and then we can do that. But the important thing about doing that is that gives us another way in which we can explore the data using these query views here. So if we click on the query button, this gives us a dialog here which shows along the top here, this first box is what aspect of the data in the project we want to look at. So this by default is a property. So that's a property for the which we've used to describe the source, such as gender. And there's also various ways that we can look at the work that authors have done, different people working in the project have done, when that work was done, and also the level, which is another way of grouping the categories together. So we can look for just, for example, if we had something about area, a level for area, then we could look at that across the whole project. But I'm actually going to stick with the property now. And you'll see here we've got all of the different ones we put into the project. So we've got gender, occupation, how they voted. We choose gender and female and then click on the run query. Now what this does is shows us all of the coded text just from the women in the project. So now we can see that, okay, women, were they overwhelmingly negative? Well, more codes have been attributed to the women in the project for negative than positive. And by clicking on any of these, again, you'll see you've got these bubbles showing the relative sizes, and this is in descending order here, and 82. So it's actually 82 pieces of text coded being about negative in the women. So we can actually make this query more and more refined here. We can add extra categories. So we might want women who were of a particular occupation, or just women that voted in a particular way. So you can keep adding these different criteria to make a more and more specific, or actually a more and more vague report, because you've got this and or box here. So if you choose and, then it's saying that a piece of text has to meet both of these properties. So it has to be gender equals female and voted equals no. But if you select or, then you can do something like well, gender equals male or female, and then that will give you both of those. If we run that query, we'll actually get the results from pretty much everyone in the project, actually. But we'll remove that for now because there's one other thing that we can do that's quite useful here, which is actually to do a comparative view. So you'll see this button here on the left for the comparison query mode. Now, when we click on that, we actually split the screen again. So we've got a query on the left and a query on the right. And so if we've got gender equals female on the left, we'll change this one on the right to gender equals male. Then we'll run the query again. And now on the left, we've got all of the results from the women, and on the right, all the results from the men. And we can see in this side-by-side view different relative sizes. So it may actually be that we've got more text coded to men than women at the moment. But you could also see there's a lot more people talking about negative aspects of the campaign from men than there are from women. Although actually it's interesting, these seem to be pretty much in the same relative order, so there probably isn't very much difference. But there may be difference in the context of what people are saying, and by clicking on any of these, we can actually see the text. So we can see the text for what women were saying on the left about positive aspects of the campaign, and on the right, what the men were saying about positive aspects of the campaign. So you may read through those and see that although there's a similar amount of coding and those are being discussed in similar ways, there's actually quite a difference in the substantive text of what people are saying by gender, or by any of the other properties that we have here. So we could do this by occupation, or it'd be very interesting to do to compare the people who voted yes and people who voted no, and see how they are describing the campaign from their own eyes. There's a couple of other features here. We can actually slide that panel open and close. If you want a full screen view, want to see a little more. And as I think you probably saw me do earlier, you can actually make sure you've got a little bit more space to show the text by changing the width of the columns here. Now, there's another thing that we can do here, which is actually to generate a report which just has one of these results. So you can see we've got a report for left query and right query. And if we did that, we would actually generate a report that started by containing an overview of the whole project, but then only had the coded text for the one of these queries. So we could have a report with just the results from the women or just the men. And that would be useful if you wanted to share some of these insights in a particular way. There's actually no way to export a report that has this comparative view at the moment, but you can obviously have a query which has any number of different criteria in it. So you can generate a report which is very specific interest. So if you're looking just at a particular demographic group, particular age range, a particular gender or location, then you can produce a report with the outputs just from those particular people. But for now, I'm actually going to go back to the main project. So click on the home button again to take us back to the main view. And I want to go through one other thing that's quite a common thing which happens when you go through and do coding, and especially recoding, is sometimes you want to split apart some of these views. So you've got this, for example, here, we've got this category for trust. And if we double click on that, we'll see all the stuff we've coded as being about trust. But how I've done this is I just have one category for trust, and it's actually kind of trust and antitrust to a certain extent. So it's people talking about trust in general, but not necessarily being trusting. They may be untrustworthy of what's being said. So for example, here in this trust campaign, we've got someone saying, I think most people do not trust politicians at all. So it may be that we go through and we do all the coding. This is very common when doing qualitative analysis. And we decide that we either want to merge or we want to actually break up into more detail one of these different categories. And I'll just show you a way that we can do that quite easily. So I'm going to click and go back to the home view here. And I'm actually going to create some new bubbles, some new. So I'm not quite sure what I'm going to call this. So just by right clicking on the canvas, I can click on add quirk here. And I'll call this, I guess, do not trust or untrustworthy. I'm going to make that red because that seems like a negative thing. And I might want to put a better description in for what this actually means. So I'll put in trust. Really make a lot of sense. But anyway, so now we can drag that on there and create a subcategory for trust, which is untrustworthy. And let's actually just create one more, which we will call very trusting. So it may be that we don't want to just pull out the positive and negative aspects here, but we may actually want to start grading these in some way to say these are actually very positive statements of trust, and these other people are saying, oh, well, we trust them a little bit. So now we've got these two categories here. We don't actually have any text assigned to them. So if we double click on the parent node here, the trust node, now this has got all of the text here, which is quite a lot, which we've added to trust in general, but there's nothing yet for untrustworthy or very trusting. But what we can do now is actually drag and drop from this already grouped trust and break it out into untrustworthy and very trusting. So for example, this one here where people are saying, I think most people do not trust politicians at all. Well, I'm going to put that on untrustworthy because I'm pretty sure that's actually where it belongs. And what I can do here is actually remove, by right-clicking on the trust here, remove it from trust, and now it's just in untrustworthy. So I think this is also another untrustworthy one. So I'm going to put that there. And I think this one is an example of someone being very trusting. So we'll put that there, very trusting. So in this way, this is quite an easy view from which to break out your codes later if you want more detail, because we've got everything we've got as trust here, and we can still keep those as being about trust if we want to, but we can also add them to untrustworthy or very trusting. So here, this very capable politician, okay, that's very trusting, so that's going to go on there too. So it's a very easy process to go through and do some extra double coding and to break out those themes. Now, it's a very common thing that happens during the course of the coding process. You start out with an idea and you just have one theme for it, and then you decide, actually, that's a very important theme. I need a lot more detail to describe those quotes and to actually be a lot more specific in how I code and describe them. So that's how I would go through and do that. Quite a lot of people ask about that, so I just wanted to give a quick overview of how to do that. Now, one of the other things that we can do here is actually the reports and the output. And I'll just give you a quick overview of doing those and generating some of those. But before I do that, let's have actually a quick look at the search now, because there's a couple of features in the search which are much more useful now we've actually done the coding. Because with these other criteria here, we can actually refine the search results to any of the properties. So from a particular gender, so we've got gender equals female, and we want to put in the search term SNP, which is one of the political parties here. We can actually see all the results. You see they just come from the women's. So that's from Ida, Paula. So Helen, there we go. So now we've done the coding, and it's quite useful to do that. So again, this is another way which we can do keyword searches and see if there's some specific difference between some of the different categories. But the other thing we can do here is actually put in the quirk. So here we've got this long list of all the different categories in here, but we can actually look and see, for example, if we wanted to see Labour, a different political party here, in all the pieces of text which we coded about Labour, what do people say about the SNP? So we can run that search, and here we go. So this one's person saying, well, if you dislike the Tories, you had to vote Labour, and then you kind of vote Lib Dem, but now the SNP are a realistic choice. So now this is interesting because we're just looking at these specific quotes here, which are about people talking about Labour and the keyword SNP. That's a little bit redundant here, actually, because we've actually coded Labour and the SNP. But if we had some other keyword here that we've not put in before, like, for example, campaign, you can see everybody using that particular word. And don't forget, there's the synonym search here as well. So we've got these synonyms for campaigns. We've got agitate, that's not quite right, but cause, yes, that's definitely right. Crusade, no. Well, drive, effort, fight, I think that's fine. And run, yes. So those are all good keywords. So if we run that again, you can see these will now come up with cause and things like that in there as well. So again, that's another interesting way that we can explore the text now we've coded it, but actually using keywords. And again, of course, now we've put in this particular keyword for campaign and cause and fight. We could actually create a new bubble here and then just drag and drop the results straight from the search results and create and very quickly populate a new campaign topic. So I showed you splitting apart, but I'm also going to show you now merging. So for example, here we've got the very trusting, we've got the untrustworthy. And if you remember, we actually removed some of the things from trust to put them straight into untrustworthy and very trusting. But what we can do is actually, if we decide now we've changed our mind, okay, we're not that interested in trust, we want to put those back again, or more likely we had something, for example, like here we have Scotland and Scottish identity. So maybe we decide that we thought those were going to be very separate things when we started coding, but in fact, I don't really think that those are so significant. What we can actually do is merge those two. So let's merge the trust and these untrustworthy back again. So all we have to do is right click on the one that we want to merge with, the one we want to keep. So that's trust. Merge quirk with, and then choose from here untrustworthy. It's in alphabetical order, I think so. And then that will click on where, think about that, and put together, it'll actually create, as it says here, trust merged, a new quirk with the name trust and merged. And this is being very slow today. As I said, this is working with a fairly massive project, even though we've not done very much coding with that particular bubble. So what we can do is, the other option here is we can also split apart these different bubbles. So sorry, we've done splitting apart, but we can also duplicate them. So this might be a particularly interesting thing to do. If you wanted to break them apart, you can create one code which is in the original sense. There we go. So now we've got our merged trust bubble. And what we can do is actually create a duplicate here as well. So we can create another bubble, which is called trust. And that way, if we wanted to alter that in any way, or we wanted to say, okay, well, one is going to end up being untrustworthy and the other one is being trust, but we're going to split those, then these duplicate and merge quirk functions can be used to do that. So there we've got another bubble here, trust merged duplicate. So we've got quite a lot of these now. And that way we can, another way that we can protect the coding that we've done in that particular category, but play with it further, either to break it up or merge it together. Okay, so that's pretty much all I wanted to do for the working with the codes, except for one last thing I'm going to show you, which is the levels function. Now, I've not really gone over this very much in the previous video, and I'm just going to go over it very quickly. But now, let's talk about a particular use case where we have this theme here for Scotland, and we've made this its own theme because it's quite important. We've got things like independence, Holyrood, which is the Scottish Parliament, and Scottish identity. But we've also got other areas here. Now, the trouble is Scotland can't be its own thing and also be described as another area. So what happens when there's a code which belongs in more than one aspect? So, for example, here, I think we've got things like politicians and individual politicians. Well, if we wanted to describe people as being individual politicians, but those politicians also belonging to one of these parties, we can't do that with the grouped categories because a child node can only have one parent. But that's where the levels come in. We can create levels of interest which let us have particular categories that encompass themes and topics from many different sources. So, for example, let's do that here with the Scotland one. So I'm going to right click on Scotland, select quirk properties, and you can do this from any of them. You see here there's levels. So I'm going to click here on manage levels and put in what should we have? So we've got to put a number so that the levels are hierarchical. You don't have to end up using them in a hierarchical way. And we'll put in the description here. Let's say location, I think. And then save that. And we'll create one more actually, which is politics. Put a number in there, politics. Yeah. Save. So now we've created two new levels, one for location and one for politics. And let's actually create another one, which is countries. You'll see why in a minute. Okay. So we've got these three different levels now, but by sliding this level here, we're on the one for Scotland. We can say that Scotland is a location. It's not politics, but it's also a country. So now that's the beauty of the level system, is that one quirk can belong to more than one country. And you can have quirks which are subcategories of something else belong to many different levels. So Scotland is a location and a country. And for example, if we go now to Glasgow, go quirk properties here, well, Glasgow's a location, but it's not a country, it's a city. So we might have a different level here for city. That could be quite useful. But we can make sure that that is tagged here as a location. And if we go back somewhere else, I think we have, well, we've got rest of the UK. That can be described as a country. Quirk properties, so that's definitely a location. It's definitely a country. Well, questionably a country, but good enough for me. And also somewhere here, we do have something for England and the rest of the UK, I think. So there's Westminster here. So that's also a location. There's also really politics because Westminster is the location of the Parliament in England. So we can save that. And in that way, you know, with the query view that we had earlier, let's remove this and go back to the single view. Now we can look at the levels here for location, and we can get the results from all of the locations. So this is quite interesting. Obviously, particular things are coming back here. So we've got Westminster, we've got rest of the UK, we've got Scotland, but everything which is a location. Or we can see everything which we described as a country here. And we've got Scotland and we've got rest of the UK. That's what we described at the moment. But we can bring all of those things together in one view, which is a very useful way of subcategorizing your quirks again. Right, so I keep saying I'm going to go back and do this. So let's actually do that now. And let's look at the report generation. Now, this is going to be a little slow because it's a big project. And when it's generating the reports, what it actually does is create views which you can import into if you were doing a PowerPoint presentation or into your thesis or a report that you're writing. So views of the canvas area. So actually this view that we have here, also for the hierarchy view, so you can show the relations between the codes, and those overlap views. You can see it's generating those now. And when you've got a big project like this, and there are lots of different codes, it's obviously generating these images for each of these different projects, and that's why this process takes a little while. But once it's done, it's then very quick to save the project in lots of different ways. And the reports are useful because it's a good way to share the data with someone that doesn't have Quirkos, or in a format that's easy to kind of print out. We'll also show you the word export in a minute, which is useful to export the text, but this is very specifically showing you the data and the coding that you've done. And it does it in a way that's very customizable, and you can share in a bunch of different formats. I mean, you can print it out directly from this view. If you want to go to paper, you can create a PDF, so that kind of locks it in a particular kind of fairly uneditable format that you can share with people. And you can also export it as a website, actually, an interactive website. And that's the way that preserves the images, so that you can pull those out and use those in your different documents. So there's quite a flexible way to share the data when you've done all of your coding and spent hours doing all this work. So I'll just show you some of the options here. They're fairly extensive, and there's lots of different ways in which you can customize the different things that appear in the report. So I will show you the some of the different options, but it's best that you really spend some time and explore those in your own time, because there really are a lot of different ways that you can customize how the report looks. So this is the overview. It's going to load up here in a minute. And you'll see here, these are the options I talked about. So you can print here directly, save it as HTML, save it as a website, which you can share with other people. Or there's the option here to save a PDF, and also to open in a web browser if you wanted to look at it in more detail in your web browser. So I'll just make this full screen, actually, just so this is a bit easier for us to see. So here on the left, we've got the preview. This is how the report will look. And on the right, all the options for different sections that we want in here. So for the first example here, you've got this report info here. This report was generated by Daniel at such and such a time for such and such a file. Well, if we don't want that, we just untick that box there that says report info, and it's gone. So this is how we customize the different things that we want to see. We've got this sources summary here. And this shows us all of the different documents that we brought in, who brought them in and when, how long they are in characters, and how many quotes we coded from them. Well, maybe we don't want that either. So we just untick that sources summary box. And then we've got this overview here. So this was the properties overview. And that shows us a graph of, well, showing us that we've not defined the gender for a third of the subjects. So we need to go back and do that. But we can also see here, wow, this is a huge file. Some of the canvas view here. So this is how we had the canvas view. And we can actually turn off things like the coding numbers. If we didn't want to see the numbers on the coding, just keep that a bit more pure. And we can also have them arranged in different ways. So here we've got this by title order here. So this is, oh yeah, this is reverse alphabetical order. Let's actually have that ascending. It makes a little bit more sense. We can have both if we like. And so various different ways that we can show the canvas. And obviously in a view like this, it's very good because the sizes of the bubbles correspond to how much text we coded with them. So you can immediately see in these views that lots of people saying negative things more than they were about positive. And also things like, you know, people were talking about policies a lot more than they were talking about politicians. So when we've gone below that, we've also got the actual quotes. And this is kind of the main section of the report here. So we've got, first of all, we've got here the text sorted by theme. So the theme here being messages is the first one that's come up here. And this is all the text from messages. And this is a huge project. So this is everything from different people. So here's Ida, here's Jim. Who else have we got? Jim saying quite a lot about this. Paula, with this color-coded stripe here, this which tells us the theme that we're working with. And there's various ways that we can change how this looks. So we can order them by size, by coverage, for example, and also position in source if we wanted to preserve where in the text that went through, and it's rearranged those now. There's also an option here to have text by source, and that'll actually make this report twice as long again, but it will put through, rather than everything by theme, which we've got here, so everything everyone says about green, everything everyone says about EU, we'll also have the text by the person. So here we've got everything that Adrian said, and then below that, everything that James has said. So those are the different ways in which we can sort the text, and we can have them it just one way or the other. And there's also options here to change how the quotes look, and also to put a bit more detail by them. So who did the coding and when, we can put that in. We can also put in some information here about what percentage of the source this represents. So this quote is 4% of the source and 0.3% of the whole project. We can also change the visual element of it. So we could actually have, oh, that's terrible, that particular color in the text, or we can have the text highlighted in the particular color. So various different ways that you can go through and look at the data like that and then customize it. When you're happy with how it looks, you can print it out or save it as a PDF to share with someone else. But if you wanted to give someone the text and let them explore it in this way, because with all these options you can go through and look at particular things of interest, you can save as HTML and then share that document with people. So you can save that whole folder, and then they've got exactly this set up here, this interactive report, and they can play with it and generate a report showing just the things that were of interest to them. So that's a brief overview of the reports. I'm going to leave that there and very quickly show you the Word export. So here we've got the option to export all the sources as Word document, or each source as a Word document. So I'm just going to do all of them in one thing. This again is probably going to take quite a long time because this is a huge project. I'll keep this on the desktop. When we do this, it will actually generate one long Word file now, which has got all of the different text in here and these strips, which are usually color coded, except not in this older version of Word, for all of the coding in the text. So this is really useful, again, to share with other people. We've got this huge 57,000 word, all these different quotes, and we're talking about, we can see here quite quickly how we've coded this about being about independence and strategy, and Alex Salmond, and this is shows also that it's been coded by me. And if you do have the right settings, which I don't have here, these will also be color coded in the way that you have them in the report. So that's one way to export. The other thing is you can also export as CSV files. So we'll do that as well. And what this does is create, basically CSV is as a very easy to work with spreadsheet file. So if you wanted to look at this in Excel or SPSS, for example, then you can use the CSV export, and you'll actually get here, if we look at this one, the highlight column, you'll actually see as a spreadsheet all of our coded text here. So here's the quotes from the text, the file that it came from, how it was coded, who did it, when, yada, yada, yada. So there's the color even here of the highlighted code. And so this is a way that you can, if you want to do more statistical analysis, for example, and use things like the conditional formatting here in Excel or in Word. For example, we wanted to see, everything from a particular quote. We can obviously do the sort and filter A to Z. Yeah, and there we've got everything on the election, everything like Sam, but in a spreadsheet format. So now we can actually bring this into some other qualitative analysis packages. You can use this as another way that you can do, you can generate graphs and codes, obviously, in Excel, and also bring it into SPSS if you wanted to do things like if you wanted to do more statistical analysis, if you wanted to do regression analysis, or much more kind of statistical tests, then you can do that in SPSS or R, or a package that supports that. So that's pretty much all we're going to cover for today. This is a live session, so if you've got any questions, do let me know in the chat window now. I'll bring that up just in case. But otherwise, that will do us for the day, I think. Okay, looks like there's no more questions. So thanks for coming along today. Again, I'll put the links below this video for you to find the referendum projects. You can go through it yourself. Do check out our website. You can download a free trial of Quirkos if you want to give it a go. And with the projects we've got there, you don't have to play around with your own data. You can use the example data set there for the trial. And don't forget, there's various other videos on our YouTube channel. There's manuals you can download, lots of other support. And always contact us in the forum or drop us an email if you've got any questions or anything that you would like to see demonstrated in a future workshop. Thanks so much for coming along today.